Secret operation, massacring villages, killing millions, secretly bombing an entire nation. They wiretapped a hotel room. They got caught and the government was deposed because of secret documents Daniel Ellsberg exposed. One government came down, and to prevent a repetition of this fact, the next government passed the Freedom of Information Act. Each administration since then hoped it would go away, and then they finally seized the chance on a September day. They passed the Patriot Act before a single congressman had read it. But don't ask the executive how they interpret it, because that itself is secret, never to be revealed, just like their secret prisons and all the torture sessions they concealed. Then they formed the PRISM program so they wouldn't even have to ask compliant corporations to assist them in the task of collecting information. Every email you ever wrote, every book you ever read, every call you ever made, everything you ever said. I looked into a prism. What did I see? A police state looking back at me. The secret government men lied to congressional committees. Secret information even a senator can't see. Secret bureaucrats working with secret corporations, enforcing secret laws, forming secret juries to serve a secret cause. I looked into a prism. What did I see? A police state looking back at me. One brave man came forward and then he fled town. And now the secret government men mean to hunt him down. Feinstein says he's a traitor. McConnell said so too. But I'd say if we have a future, it's because of the whistle that he blew. I looked into a prism. What did I see? A police state looking back at me. I looked into a prism. What did I see? A police state looking back at me.
Hello, people. So this is my radio show, or, my very intermittent internet broadcast. Let's see. Well, if you're out there, feel free to join the chat room and also let me know if this is working and if you can hear my voice and it's coming in okay and all that, because there seems to be some issue with the microphone, or there might be, I'm not sure. But I haven't done this broadcast for a couple months because I've been in Europe and the times didn't work out as far as when I might do this, and I was too busy touring and playing gigs. And now I'm home for most of the month, and I'm doing broadcasts for the first 3 Sundays of July. This one and next week I'll be doing a Palestine special, and the week after I'll be doing a live cover songs special, and of me singing songs live with a guitar. Shocking, I know, but there you go. So that was Prism, the title track of my new recording, Into a Prism, which is now the title of my world tour coming up, in case anybody's listening from anywhere in the world where I might be coming, which includes New Zealand, Australia, Hong Kong, Japan, various countries in Western Europe, and various parts of the US and Canada over the course of the late summer and fall. Right now there's still a heck of a lot of room for more gigs, so if anybody feels like booking a gig, I'd love to hear from you at david@davidrovics.com, or you can write me on Facebook or Twitter, or Gmail, which is the same as the david@davidrovics.com email. And I feel like I'm making commercial announcements, which is kind of what I'm doing, but hopefully you don't mind. So that last track was more about current events than about historical events, because it's very current. Currently, Edward Snowden, whistleblower extraordinaire, is holed up at the airport in Moscow, hopefully soon managing to find his way to Nicaragua or Bolivia or Venezuela, all fine countries which have offered him asylum from the evil clutches of the American Empire. And otherwise, this broadcast is basically about history in song. And for some reason, I can't load my Hootsuite. Well, basically, all my history and song stuff is dependent on being able to look up what posts I have pending on Hootsuite. But I need to do a better job of that because of organizing these things, because Hootsuite is not working at the moment. It's sending out scheduled posts, but not telling me what they are in advance. So that's kind of annoying. But I have a very antiquated history and song section on my website, and I've managed to remember some other things and look them up and stuff. So I think we'll be okay. And in terms of history and song, hey Jack's tuning in from Hong Kong. Who else is out there? Say hi. Hey, Daniel Victor Brown. Where are you? What part of the world are you in? That's we got at least 2 countries tuning in, and I will Cincinnati. All right. So I'll play a song related to history, fairly recent history, you know. Sometimes it's recent, sometimes it's not. But July 1st, we're doing July in history and song. I skipped May and June. Maybe I'll get to that next year, depending on tour schedules and how well I can manage to do an internet show from the road. Maybe I'll pull that off next month from Japan. We'll see how that works. But here is well, on July 1st, I believe, when was it, 1997? When was it? July 1st, 97. The Cannabis Cafe opened in Vancouver, British Columbia, and now it's closed a long time ago. Since then, since after I wrote the song, it closed. Hopefully, you know, I didn't have anything to do with that. But there is a Cannabis Cafe up the street here in Portland, Oregon. So if anybody's listening in Portland, then here's a song for the Cannabis Cafe. And of course, in the state of Washington, just to the north of where I live here in Portland, Oregon, they legalized cannabis for recreational use on the same day as Colorado did it. And they also, on the same day as they legalized cannabis for recreational use, they also legalized gay marriage in the state of Washington, which makes very good sense because, as you devoted Christians out there know, in Leviticus 3:16, I believe it is, it says, if 2 men lie together, they should be stoned. So it makes perfect sense to legalize gay marriage and marijuana on the same day. Here's Cannabis Cafe.
I wish I was up in Vancouver at the Cannabis Cafe, smoking good old Sansamilia at the beginning of the day. But here I am in New York City, hiding out in Central Park, getting kidnapped by the police today sometime before dark. But I wish I was up in Vancouver at the Cannabis Cafe, smoking good old Sansamilia at the beginning of the day. The judge is down upon me frowning. He said, kid, get on your way. Just don't start out your mornings with espresso and a J. I said, I wish I was up in Vancouver at the Cannabis Cafe, smoking good old Sansamilia at the beginning of the day. Eric.
hitched a ride out to Portland, caught one up to BC, took the bus over to Hastings Street to have a bowl with my coffee. Now I'm up in Vancouver at the Cannabis Cafe, smoking good old Sansamilia at the beginning of the day. One more time. Now I'm up in Vancouver at the Cannabis Cafe, smoking good old Sansamilia at the beginning of the day.
That's the great Sean Staples on mandolin there, and Rich Calogero on guitar, and Maria Nazaro singing harmony vocals, and from my bluegrass CD recorded in the year 2000. That was I remember the gig well. It was just before, it was at Club Passim, where they never booked me anymore for some reason. Just before the A16, the protests against the World Bank and the IMF, I think were like 1 month later or a few weeks later in Washington, D.C., and they were damn good protests. There were tens of thousands of people surrounding the 90-block perimeter of the IMF World Bank meetings, and lots of police brutality, but the lines held and the meetings were messed up, and a lot of delegates were delayed getting in, and nobody died, so it was good. So July 4th, 1839 was of course July 4th being the date that has come to be celebrated as Independence Day here in the U.S., which I think is actually related to the War of 1812 more than the Revolution. But anyway, July 4th, tenant farmers in upstate New York held a meeting, the first of many meetings, talking about abolishing the leasehold system. Back then, and still today to some extent, and certainly still today in England and other countries, there was what the leasehold system was one where tenant farmers never had the chance to own their land. They always lived on land that was owned by the rich, who sponged off of them like the parasites they are, based on nothing other than the fact that they owned the land, which was given to them by the crown, and when it was stolen land in the first place here and around the world. And eventually the tenant farmers, after hundreds of years of living under this feudal, disgusting system, rebelled, and that was what became known as the rent strike wars, or the rent strike movement, or the anti-rent era, or the anti-rent movement, etc. And of course there were very effective rent strikes in many other countries and cities, in Chicago and Glasgow, Ireland, and various other places around the world. And the rent strike movement went on for quite a while, and basically led directly to the passing of the Homestead Act in 1862, and also led to the abolition of the leasehold system in New York State, well, at least for future leases, not for current. So basically a lot of landlords sold their land under the pressure of the rent strike movement, and of course not getting their rents, figured it was better to sell the land rather than just not getting any rent anymore. And it was an amazing movement. When it used to be that when the farmers blew on their tin horns, it was to get people to get their workers to farm workers to come in for lunch and stuff like that, or to let them know the day was over or whatever. But then under the rent strike, the blowing of the tin horn meant only one thing. It meant that everybody else should come there in a hurry and help defend the farmer from the forces of the state who are coming to try to evict them or collect rent, or steal their animals in order to collect rent in a different form. And they blow the tin horn, and then within hours or minutes or hour, depending, there would be up to 1,000 or more people coming to on horseback, mostly to come to their defense. And they called them, they dressed as what they called Indians, which they weren't Indians, but they dressed in a sort of calico fabric and leather and various masks. They wore masks, animal masks of various kinds, and they talked like your sort of stereotypical movie Indian, like very simplified grammar, and they of course were wearing masks so that people wouldn't know who they were, and I just, my phone is set up so that it only tells me. I used to have Facebook and Twitter notifications. Changing the subject here. I used to have Facebook and Twitter notifications on my phone, and I got rid of that because I got, for a lot of reasons. I wrote an essay about it called "The Luddites Were Right" on my blog. If you want to read about that, or read about my recent travels in Europe and my experiences playing at a conference in England, I wrote some blog posts on the Songwriter's Notebook blog, which you can find out there on Blogspot or on davidrovix.com. But anyway, I kept my phone. The notifications, the only notifications I get that pop up on my phone now are text messages and donations. So, thanks to Bernd Schlapsy for that $10 donation that just came in. And if anybody else makes donations to help cover the costs of doing this radio show, or to help me make another CD, or if you want to buy my latest recording, Into a Prism, then I'm going to embarrass you publicly and thank you for it if you do it while this radio show is happening. So anyway, back to the rent strike movement. Here's a song about that for July 4th, 1839, and the preceding decades of the anti-rent movement in New York and around the world at that time, in a very tumultuous decade known as the 1840s, which more people need to know about. It was amazing. 1848, every monarchy in Europe, with the exception of Britain and Russia, was overthrown. And in every case, they came back to power. Kind of reminds you of Egypt. In every case, they came back to power a few months later, but they came back to power ruling over a very, very changed situation where the peasantry had a lot more rights and a lot more confidence and a lot more power that they had exerted on the streets and on the farms, etc. Anyway, here's a song I wrote a few weeks ago, Landlord.
Patroons came from Holland to America, became landlords where none had been before. Soon one man owned 500,000 acres on both sides of the Hudson River shore. He invited families to move in and give him 30% of everything they grew every year. This is how they'd pay the rent. His name was Rensselaer. He became one of the richest men on earth. In today's terms, $90 billion is how much he'd be worth. All this for doing nothing but saying all of this was his. I have the power of the state behind me, and I'm in the landlord biz. After 200 years of this and one revolution, another Rensselaer had another son. And this Rensselaer was greedier than his ancestors dead and past. It was the 1840s and things were changing fast. It was the straw that broke the back The bottle was uncorked. They started organizing meetings, the tenant farmers of New York. They found the strength of numbers. They found the power of suggestion. They found each other asking the same question. Who gave you the right to be a landlord? To live a life of ease while others toil? Who gave you the right to be a rich man while the rest of us pay you so we can work this soil? They vowed they would stop the rent collection. They vowed they'd bring this madness to an end. And when one blew the tin horn of distress, he soon found he had 1,000 friends. With calico skirts, masks upon their faces, on horseback, armed with knives and guns. They chanted and they yelled and they kept their farms and they kept the sheriffs on the run. They asked, who gave you the right to be a landlord? To live a life of ease while others toil? Who gave you the right to be a rich man while the rest of us pay you so we can work this soil? Governor's militias tried to stop them, but nothing could be done to break their will. And by 1848 the landlords buckled, sold their holdings to the farmers in the hills. Yes, they overthrew this feudal system, but it's replaced now by speculators and banks. And you can still hear the homeless families asking of all the landed gentry in our ranks, who gave you the right to be a landlord? To live a life of ease while others toil? Who gave you the right to be a rich man while the rest of us pay you so we can work this soil? Who gave you the right to be a landlord? To live a life of ease while others toil? Who gave you the right to be a rich man while the rest of us pay you so we can work this soil? Who gave you the right?
So I'm hearing little skipping noises and stuff, like staticky, kind of like vinyl kind of stuff, but I'm pretty sure that that's not coming through on the broadcast. But maybe let me know if you're hearing skippy noises too. I'd be curious to know that. So that's Landlord, second track on my CD, Into a Prism, and thanks, Daniel. I have to admit, I think it's the best 2-chord song I've ever written, and you can listen to the whole thing for free on Into a Prism on Bandcamp. If you go to davidrovics.com and click on Into a Prism there, or go to Bandcamp, davidrovics.bandcamp.com, and you can listen to the whole thing for free or download it for $7. And oh, good, Jack says it's coming in clear as a bell. Good. And I'm skipping around in July a bit because for the problem I'm having with Hootsuite, and my general lack of organization. But I just discovered that on July 2nd, I believe it was it July 2nd or July 1st? Anyway, when July 1st or 2nd, just a few years ago, there was the United States Air Force did what it has done on many occasions, and bombed a wedding. It was July 1st, 2013, last year, on July 1st, the United States Air Force with AC-130 gunship struck a wedding party. Fired, bombed, I'm not sure. Killed 48 people and injured 117. 48 people, of course, as usual, mostly women and children. This happens every few weeks. Sometimes we hear about it. My friend Guy Smallman from London was there in the aftermath of a number of these U.S. Air Force massacres. And here's the title track, too. the CD I recorded with a fantastic band just about a year ago this month here in Oregon, thanks to the contributions of many people who supported my Kickstarter campaign, without which I would not possibly have been able to make this CD. Here's the title track about just that, massacres just like that one that happened right around the time I recorded this song, a couple months after I wrote the song. Meanwhile in Afghanistan.
50 heads of state came to threaten and to boast, to articulate their message and together make a toast to the new schemes they're hatching, to the next regime they'll change, to the next nation they'll turn into a bombing range. They hyped it on the radio, newspapers and TV, the anarchists who'd come and destroy the city. The anarchists who come and the undercover cops, the old Chicago Red Squad and their psyops. It's the cops who bought the petrol, the cops who bought the cans, the cops who brought it home, the cops who made the plan, so they got the terrorists they wanted. Now they're doing fine, they got the terrorists and they got the headlines. I wanna know who, wanna know who is the terrorist? Wanna know who, wanna know who is the terrorist? Meanwhile in Afghanistan, another family is dead, wiped out in their sleep as they were lying in their bed, wiped out of existence like so many are each day. This is liberation, so they say. This is liberation, and in case you are unsure, the NSA will tell you if your thoughts might be impure. While the generals fly their Air Force all the way across the ocean, they'll build military bases, drop bombs of all description. But if you drive from Florida to the city of Chicago to pay a little visit to Mayor Rombo, watch out for the cops who bring home the gasoline and your apartment becomes a crime scene. I wanna know who, wanna know who is the terrorist? Wanna know who, wanna know who is the terrorist? Meanwhile in Afghanistan, a village has been hit, a wedding party transformed into a pit, transformed into a graveyard for children, women, men, transformed into a graveyard for empire again, a place where terrorists are born with every drone attack, a graveyard for the Midwest boys never coming back, a graveyard for society, a graveyard for ideals, a place to bury all the hearts of anyone who feels. And at the meeting in Chicago, they'll talk of women's rights, they'll talk about the terrorists they've got within their sights, the terrorists abroad, the terrorists so near, the terrorists who grew up in a suburb around here. I wanna know who, wanna know who is a terrorist? Wanna know who, wanna know who is the terrorist? Meanwhile in Afghanistan, more protesters shot down by NATO troops who had to prove it's them who run this town, by NATO troops who have to show they are in control, while it all comes crashing down in the countries they stole. NATO troops committing war crimes every day, ruling over nations in the old imperial way. The lying generals in Chicago with their satellites and tanks, taking orders from their bosses, the oil men and banks taking orders from their bosses, looking suitably enraged at terror, foreign and domestic, real or staged, whether led on by informants or just pissed off by the war. The terrorists are meeting behind closed doors. I wanna know who, wanna know who is the terrorist? Wanna know who, wanna know who is the terrorist? Who is the terrorist? Wanna know who, wanna know who is the terrorist?
That's Meanwhile in Afghanistan. And thanks so much to Dave Waugh for that contribution he just made. I believe he must be listening to the show there in San Marcos, Texas. Very wonderful and interesting guy, the only left-wing cop in Texas that I've ever met or heard of. Incidentally, in terms of that last song, on July 6th, 2008, there was another massacre, strangely similar number of people killed, 47 in this case, in 2008 at the Dehbala wedding party, mostly women and children, once again killed by a U.S. airstrike in Afghanistan in 2008. Have I considered, Mark Manley's asking on chat, have I considered a sideline as a reporter on Democracy Now! Or RT? Yeah, actually, I would be very interested in such a job. Journalism is the only job I've considered other than being a musician, but so far nobody's offering to hire me. Of course, if I applied for a job, that might help, but I'm always waiting for them to come to me, because I always find that the front door is always closed when it comes to everything. Aidan Lawler, what songs am I doing? What do you mean, what songs am I doing? Clarify that question, please. Although your last name, Lawler, reminds me of another Lawler in Australia who was one of the leaders of the Eureka Stockade Uprising in 1856. Maybe you're related. He was Irish as well, as I imagine you are, with the name Aidan. Moving on to another date in history. Let's see, when was it? I had it here somewhere. July 7th, I believe, 1847. Quaker magazine called The Friend ran an article discussing the sort of the various practical aspects of logistics and stuff of importing rags from Egypt to make paper with. And it's a much mystified subject that has in recent years become less mystified, which is basically that for the much of the last half of the 19th century, from what people have recently gathered in recent scholarship, one of the main, if not the main, source of paper for the paper mills in Maine, which provided most of the paper in the United States during the last half of the 19th century and since then. But the process of making paper from wood was only perfected in the year 1900, and that's when it became the main source of paper, trees. But before that, paper was primarily made from rag, and the rag came from many different sources. But one of the primary, if not the primary source for rag paper during the last half of the 19th century was the wrappings of Egyptian mummies. And for many, many years, including right now, currently, people discount this theory as either exaggerated or completely made up. But recent scholarship seems to indicate that it is not made up, and it's certainly not made up, and it's actually quite likely the main source of paper in the Egyptian in the paper industry in the United States during the last half of the 19th century was actually imported rags from Egypt. Because when the British were building a railway in Egypt, which they ran at the time, basically, although it was ostensibly part of the Ottoman Empire, in fact it was run by Britain. They were building a railway in order to try to have a land route to India through Egypt. And when they were digging up Egyptian soil, they were constantly coming across mummies. And some rich guy in Maine who ran much of the paper industry made the calculation that with a stable population of 8 million people over the course of 4,000 years, burying their dead in the desert, where the soil was very dry and where things, where bodies would be preserved very, very, very long term. Because of course, most people at the time, as still now today, in Egypt lived along the Nile River Valley, but they didn't bury their dead in the river valley. They brought their dead out to the desert and buried them there. And so the bodies were very well preserved. And as the British were building their railway and digging up the ground, they discovered bodies, and this paper magnate dude calculated that there were probably about 500 million bodies over the course of 4,000 years buried in the sands there in Egypt. And so he started up an industry of digging up the graves of the dead and employing at very low wages Egyptian women and children to unwrap the bodies. And the British, the colonial masters in Alexandria, they used the bodies to fertilize the soil in their gardens. They used the oil that the bodies were preserved in to run their trains, and they used the wrappings of the bodies to make paper in the United States in the paper mills. And there were ships constantly going back and forth from Maine to Egypt to pick up more tons and tons of Egyptian rag, as it was called. It was not publicly made clear very often where the rags came from. But if you follow the paper trail, you'll find that that the rags came from what they euphemistically called the tombs of Egypt. And this is a song I wrote after listening to a couple of archaeologists being interviewed on a community radio station in Utah called Egyptian Rag, which is on my latest CD, Into a Prism.
People are mysterious, they have many mysterious ways. For 4,000 years in Egypt, when someone reached the end of their days, they'd be carried out to the desert, preserved in an oily broth, and they'd be buried beneath the ground, wrapped in 20 pounds of cloth, and they called it Egyptian rag. People are mysterious, some mysteries last a while, with 500 million people buried in the sands beyond the Nile. So when the British came to build a railway connecting west to east, with every trench they dug, they unearthed the deceased, wrapped up in Egyptian rag. People are mysterious, like one wealthy man in Maine who heard about these mummies discovered as the British built their train. He formed a corporation to make good use of this find. He sent steamships across the water where there were graveyards to be mined, filled with Egyptian rag. People are mysterious where there's money to be made by turning linen into paper in the body-snatching trade. The boats were sent across the sea for 50 years or more, shipping cargo over to the New England shore, filled with Egyptian rag. People are mysterious, and in the paper mills they thought there was something strange about these tons of cloth they were brought, for they'd throw it on the floor and wondered what they were seeing as the linen sprang into the shape of a human being. And they called it Egyptian rag. People are mysterious, and we may never know all the many consequences of what we reap and what we sow. But next time you hold a book printed in the 19th century, If you believe there is a God, perhaps you want to pray for mercy for what they once called Egyptian rag. Egyptian rag.
So on July 9th, 2005, some activists, wonderful people with a group in Arizona called No More Deaths. I think Lindsay, listening from Tucson, is familiar with that group. There were two people, I believe a man and a woman, if I recall. I think I met them, can't remember. But there were two folks arrested in Arizona for saving the life of a man who was trying to cross the border illegally and was dying of dehydration. And they took the man to a hospital, and apparently that was breaking the law, and they should have taken him to the police first, in which case he very likely would have died before they might eventually have taken him to a hospital, which in many cases they don't even do when it comes to the authorities. And so the trial, they were looking at a trial and being told that they were likely to get 15 years in prison for saving this man's life, and I was hearing about that and hearing about the 400 people who, on the average, die every year trying to cross the border from Mexico to the United States. And I wrote this song about one of them. And I think, I think borders are stupid. And I think that the Mexican-American border is the most stupid border of all, because it's all stolen land. And you just have to look at your average Mexican to see that they are a lot more native to this continent than most people in the United States are, and that may be a very superficial way of putting it, but it's also very obvious, and this is their land, if it's anybody's land. This is Guanajuato.
I was raised in Guanajuato, that's where I was born. For 1,000 years, that's where my family grew the corn. Farming's what we lived by, and farming's what we knew. And then the gobierno signed NAFTA, and our farming days were through. I had to leave the village, there was no other way. I had to find work somewhere or starve if I should stay. In Ciudad de Mexico, I tried to survive, but the colonias were full, there was no work to stay alive. I went to Tijuana, the maquila factories, people living by the sewage, dying on their knees. It was then in desperation I knew I had to go, leave the country I was born in, the only one I know. Across the unknown deserts to the other side, around the wall that stretches on 100 miles wide. I trudged on for days, I don't know how far I got, but I never knew in all my life the sun could be so hot. My feet had turned to blisters, my water bag run dry. I thought about mi madrecita as I looked up at the sky. I lay down for the last time, parched upon the ground. Maybe someday my body will be found, eaten by the vultures, bones bleached in the sun. Maybe I'll go to heaven if there is one. And I guess someone in California who wants to make their fields green gonna have to find another Mexican to keep their dishes clean.
That's Guanajuato from I have two different albums called 10 New Songs, one from 2010 and one from 2011, and that's the one from on the one from 2010 that I recorded at my neighbor George's place here in the apartment complex I live at in Portland, and I think the only place you can find that recording is at SoundClick, soundclick.com/David Rovics. You can download the whole thing for free. 10 New Songs, it's called. And Aiden requested St. Patrick Battalion. I should do that because I'm sure something happened in July with the St. Patrick Battalion. I just don't know what. Which of the 5 battles that they were in happened in July. If somebody can tell me that, then I'll play the song. There's a way to get people to do research for me. So on July 10th, 1957, Cindy Sheehan was born, and seems like a fine occasion to do a song for her only son, Casey, who was killed in Iraq when he was a young man.
Casey was a good boy. He treated people well. His mama loved him. Anyone could tell. She'd send him off to school, pack his lunch with care, and when he came back home she hugged him with her fingers in his hair. Cindy, she loved Casey, and when all is said and done, she is every mother, and he was every mother's son. When Casey was a little older, he spent his time each week in that church in Vacaville, in the service of the meek, in the service of his city, in the service of the Lord, with his mama in the pews, all the time they could afford. If their love alone could save us, then the world would be one. She is every mother, and he was every mother's son. People thought the priesthood was where he'd someday be, so some folks were surprised. When he joined the army, the recruiter told him he didn't have to fight. Cindy hoped this was the case and prayed for him every night. That was before they sent him to the desert with a gun. She is every mother, and he was every mother's son. His truck had no armor, and when it came under fire, it and half the soldiers in it became a funeral pyre. Cindy, she was sleeping the moment Casey died, and she knew she'd never see him. standing by her side. There was no consolation, no safe place she could run. She is every mother, and he was every mother's son. The president, he told her, he died for a noble cause. Now Cindy's wondering exactly what that was, 'cause they never found the weapons. And now that Casey's gone, it seems that oil is the game, and Casey was the pawn. Cindy's got some questions, yes, and so does everyone. She is every mother, and he was every mother's son.
That was Sean Staples on toy piano at the end. Best toy piano part that I've ever come across. From my CD Halliburton Boardroom Massacre, which you can also download on SoundClick for free. And that's the only place you can get it because it's out of print. But it shouldn't be. So if anybody wants to make another run of it, then feel free to send me $1,000. Gosh, I'm a capitalist. Let's see. So, July 12th, 2006, Hezbollah conducted a cross-border raid, killing a number of Israeli soldiers and capturing 2. Israel then proceeded to destroy much of Lebanon. And on July 30th, 2006, Israel bombed the United Nations compound in the town of Cana. And this is notable for a lot of reasons, but for one thing, it was about the 10th anniversary of the last time that Israel bombed the United Nations compound in the town of Cana, both times killing scores of civilians, mostly women and children, as usual, hiding there in the compound, hoping that they'd be safe from the Israeli bombardment there with the United Nations troops in the United Nations compound, the coordinates for which the Israelis were very well aware of. And Cana is the town in Lebanon where Jesus Christ is reputed to have turned water into wine. But that sure is not what happened on those days that Israel bombed it.
2 soldiers had been captured. They crossed to the other side. 2 soldiers taken prisoner, several others died. This is how it started, so said the Jewish state. Forget about 96, 82, 67, 48. 2 soldiers taken hostage, and by the Sea of Galilee we must defend our borders, wherever they may be. We must defend our soldiers, wherever they're deployed. 2 of them are captured, 1 country is destroyed. Somewhere in Tel Aviv, generals drawing battle lines for the town where Jesus turned water into wine. On the 10-year anniversary of a massacre of children, they thought it was a good idea to massacre some children. Anyone in the South, I heard Ehud Olmert say, everyone's a target and may be killed today. And if your home has turned to rubble, it may be pulverized some more, 'cause 2 soldiers have been captured, and we gotta settle up the score. 100,000 homes leveled to the ground. Every olive branch on offer burned where it was found. Every chance at dialogue rejected right on cue. If you're gonna burn your bridges, you might as well bomb them too. They even bombed the prison where they used to torture fighters, where they had the dogs and leashes, cigarettes and lighters, where they were kept shackled, not allowed to stand, where they torched the forests, turned them into sand. And the entire world watches. A few thousand demonstrate. Governments take action, all too little or too late. All the telephones are ringing in case you couldn't read the signs. This is the IDF, and you're in the firing line. Condoleezza came to visit for about an hour. She thought it was a party, some kind of baby shower. She said these were the birth pangs of a brand new morn. But in the hospitals today, all the babies were stillborn. The stars and stripes among the ruins say where they were made, in case anybody wonders about all that military aid, in case anybody wonders about the mines around the farms, or why so many toddlers are missing legs and arms, or why so many of them ask exactly what was meant by wiping out their homes and then giving them a tent, or why if you ask them, who is Nasrallah, they'll tell you he's our leader, and we all are Hezbollah.
Well, thank you very much, Jack, for doing that research there. July 1st, 1847, Santa Anna, commander of the Mexican army at the time of the U.S. unprovoked invasion and annexation of most of Mexico in the 1840s, gathered enough deserters and foreigners deserters from the U.S. Army to organize 2 San Patricio battalions of 100 men each. And I didn't realize there were 2 battalions, but that makes sense, given that a battalion was around 100 men at the time, wasn't it? You can tell that I've never been in the Army. And of course, most people who are aware of the St. Patrick Battalion, the San Patricios, know that they were an Irish battalion, but actually, apparently there were 2 battalions, and not only that, but they weren't all Irish. The vast majority were Irish. You can tell by their names. But as I discovered one day in San Jalisco, in DF, in Mexico City, there's a wonderful plaque on this beautiful old church. Mexico City, incidentally, is probably the most beautiful city on the planet, and it's not often known for such, but the architecture is incredible, and it's many hundreds of years old, most of those buildings in the center of the city, and it's a beautiful city and full of art and culture and all sorts of people from all over the world, all over Latin America. Every dictatorship that's ever been produced has all the people who, all the left that fled in so many countries. They went to Mexico City. It's an amazing city. I cannot highly recommend enough visiting Mexico City, and if I could speak Spanish, I would move there. Anyway, the most of the survivors of the Mexican-American War from the St. Patrick Battalion, who most of them were killed in battle, but those who survived mostly went and then others were hanged. But those who survived and escaped during the last disastrous Battle of Churubusco, they went to Mexico City, to a neighborhood that I think was an independent town at the time, and now it's a neighborhood of Mexico City called San Jalisco, which is right near where I was staying with my friend from Derry, who from Ireland, Fikra, who was getting a master's degree there at the time, and I was staying in his little apartment there in Mexico City, and we walked over to this church, this beautiful old church that many of the San Patricios were living in after the end of the war, and they stayed and mostly married and had kids, and lived out the rest of their days in Mexico City. And they still say today that there's a larger than usual proportion of ginger-haired children being born in the neighborhood. Who knows if it's true? But when you look at the plaque on the wall in San Jalisco, on the wall of that church, it's a lovely plaque to the memory of the San Patricios, and you can see quite plainly that several of the names are Polish. There's no mistaking a Polish last name, and clearly there were Polish members of the battalion, which is the first I ever heard about Polish members of the battalion, but the vast majority of them were Irish. And I've also met somebody who is descended from a Welsh member of the battalion, so there were definitely also, according to her, 2 Welsh men in the battalion. But here's a song I wrote 13 years ago for the St. Patrick Battalion, which was recorded in this particular recording. It was recorded in 2007 at Club Passim with Eric Royer on banjo and Ali Rosenblatt on harmony vocals.
My name is John Riley. I'll have your ear only a while. I left my dear home in Ireland. It was death, starvation, or exile. When I got to America, it was my duty to go. Enter the army and slog across Texas to join in the war against Mexico. And it was there in the pueblos and hillsides that I saw the mistake I had made. Part of a conquering army with the morals of a bayonet blade. And there amidst all these poor dying Catholics, screaming children, the burning stench of it all, myself and 200 Irishmen decided to rise to the call. From Dublin City to San Diego, we witnessed freedom denied. So we formed the St. Patrick Battalion and we fought on the Mexican side. We formed the St. Patrick Battalion and we fought on the Mexican side. We got about at least a quarter of a battalion right here, so you can sing along with it. We marched beneath the green flag of St. Patrick, emblazoned with Erin gold brow, bright with the harp and the shamrock and Libertad para Republica. Just 50 years after Wolf Tone, 5,000 miles away, the Yanks called us a legion of strangers, and they can talk as they may. But from Dublin City to San Diego, we witnessed freedom denied. So we formed the St. Patrick Battalion and we fought on the Mexican side. What'd we do? We formed the St. Patrick Battalion and we fought on the Mexican side. We fought them in Matamoros, where their volunteers were raping the nuns. In Monterrey and Cerro Gordo, we fought on as Ireland's sons. We were the red-headed fighters for freedom amidst these brown-skinned women and men. Side by side we fought against tyranny, and I dare say we'd do it again. From Dublin City to San Diego, we witnessed freedom denied. So we formed the St. Patrick Battalion and we fought on the Mexican side. We formed the St. Patrick Battalion and we fought on the Mexican side. Major battles. Churubusco was the last. Overwhelmed by the cannons from Boston, we fell after each mortar blast. Most of us died on that hillside at the service of the Mexican state. So far from our occupied homeland, we were heroes and victims of fate. From Dublin City to San Diego, we witnessed freedom denied. So we formed the St. Patrick Battalion and we fought on the Mexican side. From Dublin City to San Diego, we witnessed freedom denied. So we formed the St. Patrick Battalion and we fought on the Mexican side. We formed the St. Patrick Battalion and we fought on the Mexican side.
So moving on to other dates in July. On July 14th, 1999, employees of the radio station in Berkeley, California, KPFA, were locked out by Pacifica management. Pacifica is the foundation that was started by draft dodgers after the Second World War, who bought a radio signal in Berkeley, California, and started up a left-wing pro-peace radio station, KPFA. And ultimately the foundation was successful enough to raise the money to buy 4 more stations in Los Angeles, Houston, Washington, D.C., and New York City. And at a time when it was conceivable to raise the kind of money required to buy a radio station, which is now almost impossible. And they started up the Pacifica Network, and which ultimately started producing some fantastic news programs that were broadcast on all 5 stations. And then over the years, many other stations, community and college radio stations around the U.S. and in other countries started broadcasting some of these programs. By far the most well-known of these programs to come out of the Pacifica Network, to come out of WBAI in New York City, was and is Democracy Now!, and with Amy Goodman and Juan Gonzalez and others. And but at the time, for example, around the budding anti-capitalist movement around 99, 2000, and around the time of 9/11, the Democracy Now! And other flagship programs of the Pacifica Network, such as the great program still being broadcast every weekday out of Berkeley, California, Flashpoints, which you can hear at flashpoints.net. They were not being broadcast on any of the 5 Pacifica stations. They were being broadcast on some smaller college stations, but on the 5 main Pacifica stations, they were not being broadcast because the employees of the stations in New York and Berkeley and elsewhere were locked out by Pacifica management, which was in a bid to take over the network and sell the stations and make lots of money. And basically there was a battle going on within the Pacifica Foundation between the basically capitalist swine that were trying to sell the stations and make lots of money, and the left, which was trying to continue to run the network and produce great programming such as Democracy Now! And Flashpoints and other programs. And I was in Berkeley during the lockout and in '99, and was part of a demonstration of thousands of people outside of KPFA, and witnessed folks like Dennis Bernstein and other folks climb a ladder trying to get back into the station and get beaten by security that Pacifica had hired for millions of dollars. They had hired private security firms to protect themselves from the Pacifica programmers and supporters of the network as they were trying to take over the network. And ultimately the struggle against the new management was successful, and the network was continued to be controlled more or less by progressive forces who continued to put out programs like Democracy Now! And Flashpoints. But at the time, it wasn't at all certain how things would go, and of course, after the good guys won the struggle, everybody who continued to run the network was still stuck with the bills, with the bills for the millions of dollars spent on security and other things, other wasteful expenditures that were carried out by the coup plotters. Who had temporarily successfully launched a coup and taken over the network. And at the time of the Pacifica crisis, when Democracy Now! Was only being played on the web and on some college stations, that was the time that I was on the program regularly as a guest, and unfortunately, since then, they have lost their compass in terms of any kind of sense of what kind of music to play in the music breaks, and they now pretty much only play dead musicians that sold millions of records, and they have no interest in playing anybody contemporary or anybody who's writing songs about the things that they are actually doing stories about, which is, I think, extremely unfortunate, and I have no idea why they're so stupid about their music choices. It's a very big mystery for me, and if anybody out there has any idea why they only play dead musicians who sold millions of records instead of playing contemporary music about the things that they are doing stories about, please let me know and let them know. But I wrote this song basically as a response to the Pacifica crisis, and when Amy was something Amy said about about news and how it's covered, and she said that wouldn't it be nice, basically paraphrasing, if instead of showing the smart bombs being dropped from the cameras in the planes that are dropping them, if they instead showed what happened when the smart bombs hit the ground. And I wrote this song.
Earth was dying, if they said this on the news, if they would clarify the picture instead of seeking to confuse. If you could see the ice caps melting, if you could watch the oceans rise, if you could see the consequences right before your eyes, if you knew the kids were dying, if you could look inside the river where their food comes from, filled with cyanide, if you could hear the parents pleading, if they were looking right at you, if you could see the anguish in their hearts. What if you knew? The bombs are falling, if they showed them hit the ground, if you could see the bodies flying, if you could hear the sound, if you could see the rubble where the hospital once stood, if you saw the child's lifeless limbs, would you hold them if you could? If you knew that they were lying every time they spoke, for every laser-guided pinprick there were lives lost in the smoke, if instead of just the generals they had doctors too to describe the carnage of the cluster bombs. What if you knew? You knew what they were saying when they think you cannot hear, if you understood what they do, if for you it was so clear, if you knew they shut down the factory in an economic ruse, if you could kiss the cheek of the child in the sweatshop that made your shoes. Every time we went to war to fight our evil foes, they told you we were really fighting for the good of CEOs. If you could feel the hunger of the many, see the riches of the few, if they told it like it is. What if you knew? You knew that you were living in a huge conspiracy. Would you leave your suburbs, get out of your SUV? Would you hit the streets and fight for all our lives? Would you hold your ground when the stormtroopers arrive? If you knew that the whole planet depended on what you do now, would you take command with the speed our times allow? If the pundits told the truth for just a week or two and real life was shown on TV, what if you knew?
Hey, here we are. So, yeah, my computer froze up for a minute there. Maybe I got too many windows open, or maybe it's a very old, slow computer, which it is. But anyway, I'm back and seem to be still on the air, right? Am I still on the air? Yeah, it says I'm still on the air. So, moving on here. now that I'm done griping about Democracy Now! I'm never done griping about Democracy Now!, and I won't be done griping about them until they improve their music programming. Because, they, for their own sake, I mean, it's just ridiculous. Every time they're playing something about the PRISM program, they play Mr. Telephone Man, which is a cute Motown song written, 50 years ago or something. And, why did they not play my song Prism, or a song that somebody else may have written about the PRISM program? I mean, there's somebody who's produced a movie about it already, and I'm sure there's other people than me who have written a song about it, but, and I've sent it to them, as I always do, and I'm consistently ignored. And, it would be a lot more powerful if they would do a piece about the PRISM program by Edward Snowden and then play a song about the PRISM program, but they are incapable of doing that for whatever strange reason, and it's really to their detriment. I mean, the program could be so much better if the music matched the stories. It could be so much better, and it's very sad that they can't do that. And meanwhile, other programs, like on smaller stations, like Flashpoints, for example, they can do it. They only have one producer instead of 9. And why does it take 9 producers to play a 50-year-old Motown song when you could be playing something contemporary? And Flashpoints, with only one producer, they're perfectly capable of finding and playing contemporary songs related to the subject that they're doing stories about. I have no idea why they are so incompetent at Democracy Now! When it comes to choosing music, but they are, and it's very sad. And it's sad for everybody listening, and they don't know it. People listening don't know it, because, people don't think about these things. Well, I do, because I'm a musician. Anyhow, July 16th is Assata Shakur's birthday. On July 16th, sometime in the 1950s, 1947. I lost the website, and I'm afraid to find it again because my computer will freeze up again. But Assata Shakur was born, and Assata Shakur has long been a heroine of mine and many others, and she was an active member of the Black Panther Party for self-defense, and in the 60s, in the late 60s, early 70s, she was mainly involved with the breakfast program, giving food to hungry children, and she became, I guess, somewhat disenchanted with the Black Panther Party, and thought that things needed to get done that were more, that stuff needed to get done that wasn't getting done, and she became an active member, I believe a founding member of the Black Liberation Army, and the U.S. government had shoot-to-kill orders for her and for other members of the BLA. And although every time they tried to convict her of something, which basically every time a black woman in the United States robbed a bank anywhere in the country, if they didn't have a clear picture of the woman's face, or even if they did, they would say that Assata did it. They tried to frame her for so many different murders and bank robberies, but at the time they couldn't get her on any of these things. She was constantly being acquitted by juries because, at the time, in the late 60s, early 70s, even white people in America knew that the whole justice system was racist, and that even white people knew that that the Black Panthers and the Black Liberation Army had very justifiable reasons for existing and for doing what they did. And so even when they had all white juries trying to convict her, they failed to convict her, which is a little known fact that I think people should know about, because because it's a fact. And then but by 1973, when there was a shootout on the highway, when police instigated a shootout against members of the Black Liberation Army that they had pulled over, including Assata, and they killed 2 and injured others, and in the course of the shootout, 1 cop was also killed. And then they tried to get Assata on that, even though she had her hands in the air at the time that the cop was shot, and clearly did not fire that shot, and also forensic evidence showed that she did not fire a gun at all that day. Nonetheless, she was railroaded into prison. and found guilty by a jury, an all-white jury. And the reason why this particular all-white jury convicted her was because they very purposefully, they being the authorities, the prosecution, they very purposefully selected a jury of young people, young white people from the suburbs. Now, the whole point to doing that was because if they had been any older than they were, if they were not in their early 20s, then they would have been old enough to remember the 60s. They would have been old enough to know about racism and to know about the Black Panther Party and to know that they were the good guys and the system was the bad guys. But the 60s were over, and the suburbs were, people were being raised by television, and again, as they were in the 50s, and you could then by the 70s you could find young white people who were too clueless to know about reality because they were being raised by television. And so if they found people young enough, then they could find a jury that would convict somebody like Assata Shakur, and they successfully did find a jury to convict her. And she spent almost 2 years in solitary confinement, and then there was a campaign to get her at least moved to a women's prison in New Jersey instead of being held in a supermax men's prison, Rikers Island in New York. And because of popular pressure, she was moved to a women's prison in New Jersey. And in 1979, comrades from the Black Liberation Army launched a successful effort to break her out of prison. They took a couple of guards hostage, took a prison van, and in a very well coordinated effort, they without injuring anybody, they broke her out of prison, and she was underground for years. And there was a very, very big effort on the part of the FBI to find her, and they failed to do so. And after years being underground, she resurfaced in Havana, Cuba, where she lives today. And last May, the FBI, on the anniversary of the killing of this racist cop in New Jersey, last May, the state of New Jersey and the federal government had a press conference announcing that the price on Assata Shakur's head had been doubled from $1 million dead or alive to $2 million dead or alive. So here's a song I wrote after that press conference on May 2nd, which incidentally is the same day of the extrajudicial killing of Osama bin Laden, the year before, or 2 years before, whenever that was. And here's a song for Assata Shakur's birthday, 65th birthday, I believe, on July 16th.
Special Agent Ford got on TV to put a price on someone's head. $2 million, bring her back alive or dead on the very anniversary of the killing of Osama in the endless war on terror, the next victim of Obama. Enemy number one of those who brought us COINTELPRO. It's the FBI's most wanted, a real live cop show. It's not enough to kill them or have them jailed old and gray. You have to double the bounty for the one that got away. But if Assata is a terrorist, what does that make you? She was born in Alabama in an apartheid state. Ended up north where she found another shade of hate. Terrorized by racism in the schools and in the street. Terrorized by policemen for giving children food to eat. Terrorized by agents sent to disrupt and kill on sight. Terrorized for daring to stand her ground and fight. They tried to frame her for whatever, take your pick. Finally they found something and they managed to make it stick. But if Assata is a terrorist, what does that make you? One racist cop was dead. Assata's hands were in the air. She didn't fire a shot. The all-white jury didn't care. They tortured her in prison, years alone in a basement cell. Her comrades liberated her and broke her out of solitary hell. For years they tried to find her, but in 1984 she made her way to Havana, found asylum on the Cuban shore, and they terrorized the Cuban people, tried to bring them to their knees. But despite the terror of the empire, the so-called terrorist is free. And if Asada is a terrorist, what does that make you? If Asada is a terrorist, what does that make you?
So moving on to July 17th, July 17th, 1996, TWA, which used to be a major airline, was blew up in the in midair over Long Island on July 17th, 1996. I remember it well, and I was living near there at the time, and it was immediately clear, based on the eyewitness testimony of many people who, it's a very densely populated area. There were lots of people looking up in the sky at the time, including lots of fishermen who were out on the water in their boats, and they clearly saw a missile launched from the ground, arcing through the sky, hitting the plane, and the plane exploding. And then there was a cover-up that lasted for many years, many millions of dollars, lots of different federal agencies involved, and to try to say that this and a CIA video was made talking about how this was this missile didn't exist and actually was an optical illusion. And just recently, last month, there's a new documentary out by a former CBS reporter who didn't buy the official story about what happened to the Flight 800, and there's people, former NTSB investigators, now retired, who are calling for a new investigation. And given how whistleblowers such as Bradley Manning and Edward Snowden get treated, it's not at all surprising that these NTSB investigators would wait until they retire before coming out and calling for a new investigation. And some people are deriding them for this, and I think that's kind of sad, attacking the messenger like that. And I think it's pretty obvious to anybody with eyes that the flight was shot down. And the question is, who shot it down? Because there was Navy exercises going on nearby at the time, and the nearest ship at the time was leaving the scene rather than going towards the scene to try to look for survivors. They were leaving the scene quickly. And that's suspect in itself, and also nobody knows what that boat was, or if they do, it's a secret. And so who knows if it was an accidental shoot down by Navy heat-seeking missile, or if it was a terrorist attack. Who knows? I suspect it was an accidental shoot down by a Navy missile during those Navy exercises, but I don't know. But I wrote this song a few days ago.
Flight 801 left Italy, got to New York town, then expected to leave New York, go back to Italy again. It was a normal evening at first at the TWA. The flight took off an hour late after a slight delay, and it was wheels up. There was excitement in the air. For some, it was the first time they'd ever been up there. This time Flight 800 barely lifted off the ground before it was shot down over Long Island Sound. Scores of people saw it, and they wondered why. That light had left the earth and arced into the sky. They saw it hit the aircraft, saw the craft burst into flame. People asked, who fired the rocket? Others asked the same. What was to be another flight over the Atlantic Sea was a flight that wouldn't be. 'Cause this time Flight 800 barely lifted off the ground before it was shot down over Long Island Sound. Was it a Navy missile going where it wasn't supposed to go? Or a terrorist attack? We may never know. The CIA announced we understood the popular confusion. What appeared to be a missile was an optical illusion. And for some reason, which we cannot explain, there are 230 people dead. Dead they will remain. 'Cause this time Flight 800 barely lifted off the ground before it was shot down.
That's Flight 800, and incidentally, that and Asada are both on my new recording Into a Prism, which you can get by going to davidrovics.com and clicking on Into a Prism, which is near the top there, or go to davidrovics.bandcamp.com. And people who want to donate to cover that recording expense are most welcome to do so. Moving back in history on the same date, on July 17th, moving back to 1936, that is, as many of you will recall when you hear the date 1936, the date that the fascist military generals in Spain revolted against the democratically elected socialist prime minister and initiated what became known as the Spanish Civil War. And of course it was about a year later, a little over a year later, that the call went out to for people from around the world to join the Republic, the forces of the Republic, largely socialists and anarchists and communists who are trying to defend Spanish democracy from the fascist military revolt. And I wrote this song about my good friend Bob Steck, who was a member of the Lincoln Battalion, which was the name of one of the two main battalions that came from the U.S. At the time. And here's the last Lincoln veteran.
They were old when I was young. Now they've all but passed away. Now it's just a second-hand memory of the day when from all around the world they sailed off to Spain to fight against the fascists, where so many men were slain. Who will recall the days when they all stood side by side, now that the last Lincoln veteran died beside Martin Luther King, or in a veterans parade? You could see the men who made the journey to join the 15th Brigade. When men of many nations, of most every creed and hue, Catholics and Protestants, atheists and Jews, joined together in the trenches to turn back the fascist tide. Now that the last Lincoln veteran died, the working class of many nations joined in a desperate bid. With what weapons they could find, they fought to save Madrid. From Brussels and Berlin, Galway and London town, who will recall the brigadistas who went to take the fascists down? There beside the Spanish people, even the figs and olives cry. Now that the last Lincoln veteran had the tanks, but Il Duce and F deserve only some of Franco's thanks. 'Cause the fuel to move the armor came from the USA, and the men that they gunned down were from New York and Frisco Bay. Uncle Sam claimed he was neutral. Who will remember how he lied? Now that the last Lincoln veteran died. They say people get conservative the older that they age. They say that being radical is just a useful phase. But the finest communist I've known lived to 95, and he spent his whole life striving for humanity to thrive. To forget these fallen heroes is something I cannot abide. Now that the last Lincoln veteran died. Now that the last Lincoln veteran died. There's a valley in Spain called Jarama. It's a place that we all know so well. It was there that we gave of our manhood, where so many of our brave comrades fell.
So that's the last Lincoln veteran from Big Red Sessions, Nick Angelo on screaming lead guitar there. And if you go to davidrovix.com, you'll see the link to download Big Red Sessions, which you can do for free. That one is actually on a CD. Anyway, moving on to July 19th, 1723, during the sort of the tail end of the golden age of piracy. There were 26 pirates publicly hanged in Newport, Rhode Island. There had been many other mass hangings carried out by the British Navy, British occupying authorities, of pirates, and there was one in Boston Commons I read about where I believe it was 120 pirates were hanged at the gallows in one day, but I have not been able to find the specific date of that hanging. If anybody out there is better at finding dates than me, and you can find the date of other mass hangings of pirates, I would appreciate that. But the only specific date that I've found is this one, July 19th, 1723, when 26 pirates were hanged. And it was just about all that's known of what the pirates actually thought and sort of had to say about their careers and life in general, comes from their testimonies, or that comes from basically the ministers like Cotton Mather, who were trying to convert the pirates to Christianity on their as they were being, just before they were being executed. And they got a couple of conversions apparently, but mostly they got very eloquent statements from the pirates, basically saying that they should piss off. And these statements were duly recorded by clerks who, which has now formed the main body of writing that we have that were from what pirates actually said at the time. And I think the only known note written by a pirate at that time was written by Captain Blackbeard, who wrote a note to the Port Authority of Charleston, Virginia, saying, "Give us medicine or we'll blockade your harbor." But they had a lot to say, and they were eloquent at saying it when on the rare occasions that what they said was written down. It was a vibrant social movement, very militant social movement that really did more damage to the British Navy and British transatlantic trade than the entire 17-year war between Britain, France, and Spain that preceded the golden age of piracy. And I read the book "The Villains of All Nations" by a college professor at University of Pittsburgh named Marcus Rediker some years ago, and wrote this song.
This is a song about a very militant social movement that had its golden age in the beginning of the 17th century. Come all you sailors near and far, you honest men know who you are. All of you who dare be free, combine with us upon the sea. Together we will drink a toast, ride the wind on down the coast, see the merchant shipped aboard, raise a jar and swing a sword, watch to see the merchant captain crying when they see the black flag flying. The war with Spain is over now, no more Jack over the bow. We fight for no one but our class, we're gonna kick some captain's ass. All you who'd live before you die, come give an honest life a try. Sail beneath the skull and bones, pay no heed to crowns and thrones. No more greedy princes lying when you come sail with a black flag flying. No more whips and no more chains, to live free or die is what remains. If life is too short either way, you might as well live free today. All for one and one for all, we'll board the ship and make the call. Join us, all you good men, and have your liberty again. Watch the crew now leave their captain frying as they come sail with the black flag flying. Flying Roberts brave and true, and Mary Kelly's gallant crew. Seems to me the world is ours. Watch as the mighty Navy cowers. We have no nation but the sea, no creed but that we will live free. Loot and burn all that we can, that's run by a dishonest man. Their end is near, there is no denying, when they see the black flag flying. If I could predict the future, then I would, but all I know is this is good. 1720 is the year, there is nothing left to fear. We may live or we may die, perhaps our destiny is nigh. I don't know what the end may hold, but I know these ships are filled with gold that was stolen from the poor as we lay dying. So let us sail with a black flag flying.
Well, thanks so much for another generous donation from dear Jack Muir in Hong Kong. Much, much appreciated. And moving on to other dates in July. July 22nd, 2001 was the G8 protests. The G8 was meeting in Genoa, Italy at that time. I was in Bonn, Germany, and there was at the same time as the G8 was happening in Italy, at the time there was an environmental conference happening in Bonn, and of course German cops can be nasty as well, but in comparison to the cops in Genoa at the time, the German cops in Bonn were an absolute model of well-behaved cops, completely doing everything by the book. I mean, just like in the movies, in the movie versions of the civil rights movement, when people sit down in the street and commit acts of civil disobedience, they're read their rights, and then they are gingerly carried off by cops, 4 cops for each person, 1 for each limb, and then, loaded into the wagons. And that's exactly how it went in Bonn at the time when people blocked streets there and such. But this was not how it was going down in Italy. In Italy, there were most of the cops on duty at the time were 18 years old, and they were army recruits with literally no training in how to be a cop. They had some training in how to be soldiers, but it's a totally different thing from being a cop. Well, it's supposed to be anyway. And so basically their way of dealing with the protests, which of course did involve certain elements that were throwing rocks and all that sort of thing, which is how it often is, their way of dealing with the protests was to just riot and attack the protesters. Many people will tell you that's how it went down. And it's also a well-known fact that many of the people actually throwing rocks at the cops in the first place were cops dressed in black, who were the black bloc, as is often the case, were cops in Italy at the time, and this was caught on film. So during the course of the police riots outside the G8 meetings, I know many people who were there hiding in terror and being beaten, or hoping not to be beaten because they were hiding somewhere. There were people from Bonn, from the environmental protest I was at, who went down to Genoa to join the G8 protests, and they sort of hijacked a train and went down there and came back a few days later. And the environmental meeting in Bonn was going on longer, so it was going on both from the beginning and end of the G8. So people left Bonn in high spirits, heading towards Italy, and came back in very low spirits, smelling of tear gas, and in some cases in casts, and with other visible injuries. And I heard about the shooting death of one young man in Genoa, Carlo Giuliani, and read a beautiful piece that my good friend Starhawk wrote, who was also there in Genoa, who was one of the many people hiding in a building waiting for the police to raid it and attack it. And I think she actually managed to avoid getting beaten by the police, but it was looking really bad, and she wrote a beautiful piece about how we need to support each other in these times and not pretend that being the victim of a police riot is something that can easily be brushed off, and to support each other. And I wrote this song one day while in Bonn, Germany.
When the world has gone crazy and it's all becoming clear, when they're gunning down our comrades and it seems the end is near, as they're loading up the launchers for the tear gas grenades, we can take off our bandanas and kiss behind the barricades. When it's madness all around and you can see this at a glance, we will sing and we will cry, we will laugh and we will dance, as they shout their marching orders beneath the helicopter blades. We shall seize the moment for a kiss behind the barricades. They will try to break our spirit, and at times they may succeed, but our love for the world is stronger than their greed. When the building is surrounded and hope begins to fade, in my final hour, a kiss behind the barricades. As the movement grows, there will be hills and bends, but at the center of the struggle are your lovers and your friends. And the more we hold each other up, the less we can be swayed. Here's to love and solidarity and a kiss behind the barricades.
And that's from my CD Hang a Flag in the Window, and that's Ali Rosenblatt on harmony vocals, and that was recorded in Colorado in 2002, and also that CD is also out of print, but you can download the whole thing on soundclick.com/David Rovics if you are so inclined to hear the other songs on it, which I'm told are pretty good. So moving on to July 26th, 1953, the date when the Moncada barracks in Cuba were stormed by Fidel Castro and friends. And, of course, that didn't go so well, and they had to flee to Mexico, where they regrouped and formed another effort and went back to Cuba and began what became the successful Cuban Revolution. And so even though the date of the actual takeover of Cuba by the revolutionaries was on July 1st, January 1st, if I recall. July 26th is the date that the revolution is generally celebrated there in Cuba, and it is also my wife Reiko's birthday, and so makes it really easy to remember her birthday. This is I've written a few songs about the Cuban Revolution and about Cuba generally, and I'll do the one that Jack suggested, which is for another heroine of mine, along with Asada Shakur and many other women who I greatly admire, is Annabella Montes, who was born in Puerto Rico, or maybe in D.C. I don't know. She's of Puerto Rican heritage anyway, and I believe she grew up around D.C. and she was actually married to very high-ranking military general and became herself the highest-ranking person responsible for Caribbean policy in the Department of Defense. And all the while, for 25 years, allegedly, she was a spy for Cuba, and she was supposed to erase her hard drive using a protocol provided to her by the Cuban authorities, and which she generally did. But one day she didn't completely erase the hard drive, and unfortunately for her and for the rest of us, that was the night that the FBI chose to raid her apartment when she wasn't home, and found on her hard drive this information that she had been passing on to Cuba, and she was then arrested and sentenced to 25 years in prison. And she is incidentally held in the same federal gulag along with my dear friend Marie Mason, who is also in prison for a 22-year sentence for property destruction as an animal rights and environmental activist. She was sentenced to 22 years, more than 22 years actually. And like Annabelle and Montes, Marie Mason didn't hurt anybody or endanger anybody, and neither did Montes. And yet they're both in prison for incredibly long sentences. And not only are the sentences incredibly long, but the conditions in which they're being held are very, very reminiscent of a Russian gulag. And I say that specifically because not only are they almost completely held incommunicado, almost completely unable to have communication with anybody in the outside world, and this is also the same prison, incidentally, that Lynn Stewart is being held in, the lawyer from New York who has fourth stage cancer and is apparently going to die in prison, who's been denied clemency or release based on medical grounds. It's also the same prison that Afia Siddiqui is being held in, the woman who supposedly tried to resist her torturers from the U.S. military in Pakistan, and was sent to this gulag for that. And I call it a gulag not just because these are women being held for incredibly long sentences, and in supermax incommunicado environments, but because also, as with the gulags in the Soviet Union, in this prison, it's about half and half political prisoners, a mix between so-called Arab or in Anna's case sort of pro-Cuban so-called terrorists, and environmental activists like Marie, a mix of political prisoners and women who are certifiably completely insane, largely as a result of the conditions of their imprisonment over so many years. It's about 50-50 women who are screaming all the time in agony because they're crazy as a result of the conditions of their imprisonment, and political prisoners like Marie and Afia and Anna. And when I read in the newspaper, back when they had newspapers, about Annabelle and Montes and her conviction and what she had allegedly done, and my information about this comes not from her or from anybody in the prison, but from the newspapers. So I'm just passing on what was reported in the newspapers, as far as the downloading and the FBI raid and all that stuff. But based on the information in the newspapers, I wrote the song for one of my heroines, Annabelle and Montes.
25 years was what the judge said. Then he banged his gavel and shook his head. You've done wrong, you broke our trust. Now we caught you, and this is a bust. Now you'll spend these decades behind bars of steel. Thought you could play with us, but this is for real. You gave away secrets to the enemy.
now you'll live in prison in the land of the free. But here beneath this Cuban sun, I'd just like to thank you for all you've done. Today I'm torn apart, Ana Belenmontes. You are a spy after my own heart. I obeyed my conscience instead of the law. So you said at your secret trial, you took no money for your work, so says your declassified file. You warned the Cubans of the plans of the assassins from the U.S. Just what other good deeds you did, they may never tell us. But here beneath this Cuban sun, I'd just like to thank you for all you've done. Today I'm torn apart, Ana Belenmontes. You are a spy after my own heart. Of the DOD, you served the common good, working alone night and day. You did just what you should. Of all the great people I have known, there are few that I'd call greater than one woman who obeyed a higher law, the judge called a traitor. But here beneath this Cuban sun, I'd just like to thank you for all you've done. Today I'm torn apart, Ana Belenmontes. You are a spy after my own heart.
And that's Sean Staples on mandolin there, and Dave West on guitar, I believe, if I recall. That was from my CD, The Return. That was recorded in 2003. And thanks to Darren Deicide Kramer and his little outfit, Ever Reviled Records. That album, The Return, and also Songs for Mahmoud are both still in print. And you can get them on my website, and you can also download all the stuff, all the songs from both of those CDs on SoundClick, and for free. And let's see, so a couple more songs here for this program. Moving on to other dates in July in history. On July 27th, 1918. Near the tail end of what was called the Great War at the time, a horrible slaughter of working class men from many, many different countries. I think there was my good friend Alistair Hewlett from Glasgow did a fantastic album called Red Clydeside about the rebellion in 1917 during the war in Glasgow. And he has a great song about what was it, the guy who now he said, I can't remember his name, but he said a bayonet is a weapon with a working man at either end, and betray your country, betray your country, join your classes, and just say no to war or something. I can't remember. But betray. What was that? Betray your country, embrace your class, or something like that. Serve your class. It was a boss's war, and the more sensible unions, such as the Industrial Workers of the World, were denouncing the war during the World War I as a boss's war, a war of where the bosses of all these countries were trying to get the working class to slaughter each other for imperial gain. Jack says Lenin said that. Yeah, that's quite possible. Everybody was quoting Lenin at the time, for good reason. Ginger Goodwin was an organizer, a union organizer and a socialist, born in Yorkshire in England, and moved to Canada and worked in the mines in eastern Canada and eventually in western Canada, where he saw conditions even more appalling than he had witnessed in England as a youth. And he, of course, became an organizer and was well known among the miners in Canada at the time. And when the war came, he said he opposed it, and his union opposed it, and as a boss's war, and he was shot while in hiding. And he, like so many others in Canada and elsewhere at the time, was in terrible health because of basically being a member of the working class at the time, which was pretty much a guarantee that you were going to be in bad health, because in the mines at the time they didn't have, the safety standards are still awful most places, but they were horrible back then. And in the Canadian government's efforts to draft people to go fight in World War I, 50% of draft age men at the time were found by Canadian doctors to be medically unable to serve. And this was also the case with Ginger Goodwin, who had black lung from working in the mines, as did so many miners. And of course, I'm sure lots of those guys were trying to stay out of the army because they didn't want to die. But it is also a fact that a lot of these people had very real illnesses as a result of being members of the working class and working in jobs such as the mines. And Ginger had black lung and was not eligible, shouldn't have been eligible for the draft, but because of course it was all very political, he was drafted anyway, and then shot for resisting the draft. And there's a lovely little weekend event that happens around this time, sometime in the summer, around the time that he was shot, I believe. Every summer I went to it once up in Cumberland in British Columbia, and after I went to that one gathering there for Ginger Goodwin, I wrote this song.
He grew up in Yorkshire County on the class war battle lines. From the age of 14 years he was working in the mines. He saw the children dying of hunger and disease. His family was evicted and he headed overseas. Cape Breton, Nova Scotia was where he landed for a while. Then he hopped a freight for about 3,000 miles. Ended up out west by Nanaimo Bay, where he worked the number 5 pit and spent his final days. Let's remember the departed and for us the things they gave, as we're gathered here by Ginger Goodwin's grave. As we're gathered here by Ginger Goodwin's grave. In England and in Canada, from the east out to the west, the miners lived and died at capital's behest. Ginger saw the writing that was covering the wall. One big union was the watchword for the workers, one and all.
Ginger organized the miners, and they struck for better pay, and they struck the Dunsmuir collieries and fought to see the day when the labor movement could say its work was done, with a world run by workers for the good of everyone. Let's remember the departed, and for us the things they gave, as we're gathered here by Ginger Goodwin's grave. As we're gathered here by Ginger Goodwin's grave. When the war to end all wars came, he knew it was a lie. He said he wouldn't fight for bosses, he wouldn't kill or die. He had black lung from the mines, but they called him fit to go. So he hid out in the mountains, out in the rain and snow. The cop who went to find him, this is what he said: I'm gonna bring him in, whether that's alive or dead. The people gained a martyr who would never leave our side, and 10,000 workers marched when they heard that Ginger died. Let's remember the departed, and for us the things they gave, as we're gathered here by Ginger Goodwin's grave. As we're gathered here by Ginger Goodwin's grave. Let's remember the departed, and for us the things they gave, as we're gathered here by Ginger Goodwin's grave. As we're gathered here by Ginger Goodwin's grave.
A song for Ginger Goodwin, which is on my album from 2011, I think it was, or 2010. 2010. 10,000 Miles Away, which is out of print, but you can download all of it at soundclick.com/David Rovix. Have I said that too many times? I don't know, probably. But and thanks to John Fabiani, incidentally, for maintaining that SoundClick page, and thanks so much to Jack and Dave and Bernd, who made contributions during this show. Y'all keep me going, and I'm going to do one more song related to July in history, and then I'll say a few words afterwards. And but the one more song, July 31st, 2000. I was in Germany at the time. Unfortunately, well, maybe not unfortunately, I don't know. For better or for worse, I was in Germany, so I missed it. But the Republican National Convention was in Philadelphia at the time, and the police rioted, as they often do, and really beat a lot of people badly, and it both in and out of the jail cells. And this was what happened to the anti-capitalist movement. It was, in spite of all the police violence, which was really pretty massive at the time, the anti-capitalist movement, the movement against corporate globalization, against the IMF, World Bank, WTO, etc., U.S. government, the rich, was growing really from the late 90s through early, 20, whatever you call it. And it was, but police brutality had a huge impact on it, although it did continue to grow. But then when 9/11 hit, and then all the media started comparing us to Al Qaeda, then that was too much for a lot of people to handle, and the movement started shrinking at that point. I think that was it, along with the police brutality. That was really the last straw for a lot of people. Was when 9/11 happened, and then you had people on National Public Radio saying things like, last month they were protesting the World Trade Center, and now they're bombing the World Trade Organization, or the other way around. Really just saying like there was no no difference between civil disobedience and the occasional rock being thrown and a hijacking of a plane and the killing of thousands. So that was it kind of affected the movement in a big way, I'd say, especially in the U.S. But on July 31st, 2000, during the height of the movement at the time, the anti-capitalist movement, as many have called it, outside the Republican National Convention in Philadelphia, John Timoney, the chief of police in Philadelphia at the time, who was largely, responsible for the incredible amounts of police brutality at that event, decided to preemptively raid the warehouse where people like, I believe Dave Solnit was there and others were making puppets. Giant puppets, and the giant puppets were, and in many cases, continue to be a significant part of a lot of protests because they're very eloquent and you can say a lot with a puppet. They say, a picture is worth 1,000 words. A puppet is too, and puppet art, public art like that, is a very powerful tool, and the authorities are well aware of it, of this, which is why. They don't play me on the radio, and which is why they raid puppet warehouses when things like this are when people are trying to have a eloquent presence of an artistic nature. And it was one of many cases where puppet warehouses full of puppets and other art were raided and destroyed by the authorities. There was another case around the time of the World Economic Forum in New York City, just I believe a few months before that, when this same thing also happened. And the police, they also in Washington D.C., they did the same thing around the IMF World Bank protests, raided the puppet warehouse and took puppets. They tried to do that in Los Angeles, but I think were unsuccessful during the Democratic Convention, only because the Los Angeles police were under federal control because they were so incredibly corrupt, dating back to the Rodney King meeting and to the entire Ramparts division of the police in Los Angeles being fired and arrested for drug dealing. So they were under surveillance by the feds, and so they had to get a judge's permission to raid the puppet warehouse and destroy the puppets, which the judge did not give. So I think there were puppets in L.A., if I recall. I was also not around for that convention because I was also in Germany at that time. But I heard about the raiding of the puppet warehouse and carried out by none other than Police Chief John Timoney. And John Timoney was running the police department in New York City around the time of many atrocities committed against activists and others before 2000, and then he was hired in Philadelphia to head up the police department there in preparation for the Republican National Convention, which he then brutalized, of course. And then before the 2003 Free Trade Area of the Americas talks and protests in Miami, he was also hired by the Miami, Florida Police Department because, they wanted to have somebody who was good at beating up protesters and ignoring people's civil rights to head up their police department. And since then, he's been hired by the government of Bahrain, and he is now in Bahrain in the Middle East training the police in how to brutalize protesters and make yourself look good at the same time, which is, of course, his specialty. And around the time of those when did I write the song? I can't even remember, but it was written about John Timoney, and it's called Butcher for Hire. I wrote another song about him too, actually, but this is one I wrote about John Timoney.
Wanna have a protest in the USA? Wanna speak your mind in the American way? If there are some rich white men with whom you disagree and thought you have the right of assembly, there's a man that you should know, 'cause he will follow you wherever you go. John
butcher for hire. He's a brutal thug and a dirty liar. He's a cop among cops, a man among men, and oh my God, he's back again. He'll protect our freedom in his own special way by smashing in your face today. He'll spray tear gas in your eyes. He'll look into the camera and tell lies. And if you complain the deal is raw, he will declare martial law. John Timoney, butcher for hire. He's a brutal thug and a dirty liar. He's a cop among cops, a man among men, and oh my God, he's back again. He'll ban dancing, he'll ban art, he'll ban medics on go-karts, he'll ban meetings, he'll ban signs, he'll ban circles, he'll ban lines. He'll stand up upon his throne and say, go back to your free speech zone. John Timoney, butcher for hire. He's a brutal thug and a dirty liar. He's a cop among cops, a man among men, and oh my God, he's back again. But someday he'll meet his end. He's already halfway round the bend. He'll take stock of what he's done, stare at the notches on his gun. He'll look into the mirror and at his poor wife and say, oh my God, I've been a scumbag my whole life. John Timoney, butcher for hire. He's a brutal thug and a dirty liar. He's a cop among cops, a man among men, and oh my God, he's back again. John Timoney, butcher for hire. He's a brutal thug and a dirty liar. He's a cop among cops, a man among men, and oh my God, he's back again.
I think that's from the album Songs for Mahmoud, recorded in Houston, Texas in 2004. And this brings this episode of the David Rovix Show to a close. July in History and Song. And stay tuned for next week at this time, 11 a.m. Pacific Time, 2 p.m. New York, 7 p.m. in England. Who knows what time in Australia. But I'll be doing a show on Sunday, the 14th, Palestine 101, all songs and stories related to Palestine. And then the following week, on the 21st at 11 a.m. Pacific Time, I'll be doing a show where I just sit here with a guitar and sing cover songs at you and see what you have to say in the comment box. And yeah, thanks for your support. Thanks for listening. Thanks for all those people, Jack, Daniel, Donnie, Lindsay, all those folks, Aiden, who said stuff there, Issa, in the box there, in the comment thing that a lot of people don't seem to be able to use, but it's there, and I think you have to register in order to use it, but it's not too complicated. But anyway, this will now be archived in perpetuity on my Spreaker site as well as on SoundCloud and YouTube automatically. Hey, that makes it easy. And as soon as I click the off-air button, it'll get archived, which I will be doing momentarily. And there's probably something I'm forgetting to say, but maybe I'll remember to say it next week. And I'll see some of you in a week, and keep on keeping on.